All right, let's talk to one of our very regulars, Keith Levenberg. It's been over a month, as you know by now from listening to the last 2 days. Keith, I don't even know what we're talking about, but I never need to have an agenda with you. So,
yeah, welcome back on the air, and welcome back to all the Shark Nationites, well, whatever you call them.
Shark Nation Radio's Backlashers, I don't know. I mean,
Backlashers.
We haven't started selling merchandise yet.
Yeah, we need to come up with some kind of nickname there.
We'll see what we can do.
Yeah.
All right, that's an awkward start to our conversation. we'll rekindle the rapport. Hopefully, a few minutes we'll be back in the swing of things. So, how are you enjoying this NFL season, Keith?
I've been enjoying it about as much as I enjoy every prior NFL season.
Right, your baseball. At least at one point in your life, you were into that, never into football.
Yeah, no, I am not remotely interested in football. Never have been.
Right.
It was always distressing to me to see football replacing baseball as the national pastime. So it's a little gratifying to see that there has been a bit of a backlash against that lately.
There you go. Good product placement.
You know, when you design a sport so that the only way to excel at the sport is by being a thug, and all of a sudden the only people who excel at the sport are thugs. Eventually the chickens come home to roost.
Brady's the pinnacle, greatest of all time, and he's very disciplined about his eating and all that. But yeah, I know what you're meaning. I know what you mean. By the way, you notice the interesting thing about the 4 teams left in the baseball postseason right now?
What's that?
New York, L.A., Chicago, and Houston. What do those 4 cities have in common?
New York, L.A., Chicago, and Houston.
I'll give you
I don't know. They all have airports?
Well, that's true. Well, actually, New York City. Oh, no, Queens is. Yeah, 2 of them are in Queens.
They're all cities that have never been in my kitchen.
Right. Thanks. That's a Seinfeld. No, that's a not Seinfeld. Cheers reference. I'll give you another hint. Phoenix was in the running to be in there, and that's the 5th largest city, though Philadelphia was definitely not, and that's the 6th largest city. There's four largest cities in the country, and those are the 4 teams left in the playoffs. So not a good situation for small market baseball clubs.
Oh well, yeah. Well, that's always been an issue with baseball, but it never really bothered me.
More so this year. I mean, but I mean, in recent years, it just hasn't been the case. Who was in the World Series list? Cleveland, not one of the bigger markets, and the Cubs. Okay, the Cubs were, and just very interesting. I've never seen it so clearly, and it's not like it's the Mets or the White Sox either, or the Angels, which are the number 2 teams in all those cities. It's the number ones in all those cities.
Well, people have always complained about that with baseball, and I'm sort of like an old-timey conservative. So my solution is, I don't want to talk about like salary caps. Don't give me any of that socialist nonsense. If the Yankees or the Mets or the Yankees and Mets collectively have too big a market in New York, give New York another team. Split up the market further. Bring back the Dodgers and the Giants. You don't need to redistribute wealth to solve this problem.
Right. Well, they have 3 NHL teams in the New York area. Really, it should be more like 3 NHL teams in the Toronto area than the New York area, and they only have 1 there, and they still can't do very well. But that's actually, in fact, because the Maple Leafs are spoiled. They always will sell out. They don't have that much incentive to do good, even though they're doing fairly well this year. I just thought that's an interesting point, that it's the 4 largest. I don't know if it's the 4 largest markets, by the way. It's the 4 largest cities in terms of population of the city. I don't know if the Houston market's bigger than like Philadelphia or South Florida or something, but the city of Houston is the 4th largest city.
I would not have guessed that, but it makes sense.
Yeah, everything.
So I'm surprised you went straight to the NFL rather than the other entertainment news that's been titillating the last couple of weeks.
I knew we would get to that, so I know you can't wait. Let's get started on that.
Well, have you added your Me Too to the chorus? Has anyone made you feel uncomfortable?
It's so funny. I talked about that with Chad Olson yesterday. It's hilarious how they're trying to universalize this issue because it's so clearly a Democrat issue. It's just falling through. It's like Monica Lewinsky posted Me Too yesterday.
We know Monica.
I mean, really? You're the poster girl for consent. In fact, I reprimanded another guest earlier for bringing up Monica Lewinsky. I'm like, no, that's not the inappropriate stuff with Bill Clinton. The non-consensual stuff is what's the real analogy. Monica knew what she was doing. She was over 21 at the time. I think she was 22. Yeah, much
well,
like,
she knew, but he should have known better. He's a grown man.
Well, we know that, but I mean, there's so many non-consensual things we can use. And he didn't tell her job was threatened or anything like that. She loved it. I mean, that's one of the two most. That's only the second most unfortunate thing I've seen on Twitter, by the way, the last days.
The worst one I saw is actually a semi-friend post on Facebook. She goes, "There is not a woman in America that has not been subject to sexual assault, harassment, or unwanted advances." What? And I had to read that 2 times, and I'm like, wait a minute. These are 3 things. And it's like that old song on Sesame Street, you know, one of these things is not like the other one. Do not put sexual assault and unwanted advances in the same bucket. I mean, there's a couple county lines of difference between raping somebody and asking them out on a date when they say no.
Well, that's like our friend Lenny Dykstra. Like when they were putting out things in about the Fox News guy, what's his name? Eric Bowling, the assistant professor who they called Professor Hottie, who for some reason, even though she's assistant professor at Occidental College, and then nobody academically was on Fox like 100 times, said that Lenny Dykstra invited her to a party. What? Why is that in there, Lisa Blue?
She must have felt so violated.
Oh, I mean, essentially, given some of the stuff, by the way, he's in the news, too. I had an interview with him. He's not coming on the show, but I did a separate interview with him. You realize, if you're following baseball at all, he dropped out for the top 3 all-time for OPS, like that's slugging and average, like basically the top 3 postseason performers.
I did see that. Still room for number 3 to slip down further.
Well, yeah, if he goes like 0 for 3 tonight, then Lenny's back in the top 3. But he was kind of pissed about it too. He's like, "Who the F is Justin Turner?" Well, I mean, he's going to have at least 4 more.
And 1 and 2 on the list were very good company to be in.
Yeah, Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig. I mean, people, you know my theory, by the way, on Lenny and the postseason is like it actually makes sense if you know him, given that. You know, I mean, not many people would know this. I was with him in Clearwater, Florida for Darren Dalton's funeral, you know, as part of his entourage, whatever. And he just wouldn't stop complaining about the heat and the humidity. Like in Florida, I'm like, and it wasn't even that bad. We were near the water. I mean, it can be so much worse in Florida. We weren't like in Orlando. And it's like, how did he deal with it as a baseball player? And then I realized he hated playing in Miami during that brief time when the Marlins were in there, where his career overlapped. And his highest career average was in the Astrodome, the only National League dome by far. He hates hot and humid weather, being from Southern California. And the other interesting point was, like, he also talked about how he would get sexually aroused playing in New York in high pressure situations. So between those combos and the fact that you know, it never was too hot in October, it makes sense how good he was in October when you think about it.
Yeah, well, I always assumed it was just because he was so hyper competitive and like guys like that.
Definitely a factor. You know, he hates hot weather.
Yeah, they're at their best when everything is on the line, and you know, middle of May, sluggish summer day without the high stakes, you're not going to get them to rise to the occasion quite as well. That wasn't even supposed to be a pun, by the way, but Lenny did rise to the occasion.
By the way, the funniest, I didn't even get to this. I don't want to tease people. I posted this as you can't make this stuff up, like the whole models thing. You know about Britt McHenry, ESPN, the one who got fired a few years ago when she chewed out the woman in the towing lot facility. She didn't get fired. She got fired 2 years later.
Oh, yeah. I didn't know who she was, but I remember hearing about that story.
Yeah, it's an amazing video to watch. And she only got fired 2 years later. She said it was because she was a conservative, which no one even knew, I think, when she was there. So, like, Fox News had tweeted, Jennifer Lawrence, I was placed in nude lineup told to lose weight. And then Britt McHenry retweeted that. I have this in front of me. She tweeted, asked when modeling with Wilhelmina, how are you handling the weight? Always been 5'10", size 4. Told to drop 15 pounds in 2 weeks. This happens. Then someone responded to that. You were caught on camera berating a parking attendant with, lose some weight, baby girl. Do you have any self-awareness, you nitwit?
I guess alternate headline could be person hired solely for looks objects to being objectified for her looks.
Yeah, but the fact that like she will always be remembered for attacking a parking lot attendant about her weight, which is totally irrelevant. You know, which is just you know who I actually messaged that to. I said, don't ever do something like this. You didn't know her at Columbia Law School, but Haley Guestman Gold, who's been in the news lately, who I was friends with. I said, don't ever do something like this after, you know, because she knows, I mean, her career is basically done. You know Haley Guestman Gold, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, it was a pretty outrageous, but also kind of outrageously funny episode.
Yeah, I mean, I felt
it was interesting watching the clock to see how many hours it would take for her to get fired.
Yeah,
and
it was not 2 years like Britt McHenry.
Yeah, I thought first we'd see the non-apology, but this time they went straight to the firing without even the insincere non-apology.
Oh, you know what? By the way, I have to say, she knows my politics. She's always been nice. I mean, it was an immediate reaction. Like, she's not a nasty person at all. I mean, she's just like, she probably shouldn't have said that. And, I mean, I can't say she shouldn't be fired as a lawyer for doing that, because as a lawyer, you know better than to say that you're paid for your judgment. So, I mean, but I'm just saying.
Yeah, there's a bit of circularity there. It's sort of like, well, everyone knows you can get fired for doing something like that, therefore you did it and you should get fired because everybody knows that you could have. But when we take a step back and think for a minute, you know, do we really want to set this precedent where like the slightest little verbal indiscretion can ruin your career and ruin your entire life? You know, the answer to that is no. We just need to be a little bit more understanding.
Yeah, and the other thing was, I also gave her some crap about this because I talked to her when, you know, I guess there was a chance. There really never was a chance she would keep her job after this got out. But she also wrote something that was kind of offended me as someone, you know, lawyers, it's not what she does, you know, have to read the fine print and stuff. She said something like, I don't care what happens to all these guys because most of them are Republicans. I'm like, wait, you can't just interchange all and most for that. It's like, okay, so the people who aren't Republicans should be blamed for being at a concert where it was mostly Republicans, you know? He didn't just shoot more Republicans than anyone else. I mean, clearly with a machine gun, he wasn't doing that kind of thing.
Yeah, well, and there's pretty much... There's pretty much no better way to let the whole world know that you've never been outside the Acela corridor than to figure that everybody who listens to country music is a Republican.
She's not a lifelong New Yorker, though, by the way. She did go to Penn undergrad.
So that's still on the Acela corridor, isn't it?
Yes. I just want to point out that she didn't just spend her whole life in New York, close to it, but she did go to Penn. As opposed to
I did spend most of my life in New York. Although even though I'm still in the Acela corridor, I do live south of the Mason-Dixon line now.
You're from New Jersey. She's from Manhattan. It's not quite the same. You're from almost central New Jersey. You can probably watch Eagles games. You can probably tune in Philadelphia State. Well, maybe not that far up in New York.
We're still a New York sports market.
Yeah, okay. You're a little north of the line where you can get both of them in, which I guess is like Princeton or someplace like that.
Yeah.
All right, we were talking about Hollywood, though. I love our digression.
Yeah, you got to respect. I mean, not respect, but you got to be sort of amazed at the ability of the left to take this scandal that's like atrocious behavior of one of their own, and then like within 24 hours they've like totally turned it on us and put conservatives on the defensive somehow. It's really something to see.
Yeah, it's also come off the headlines because there's so many other things, like this Comey stuff, uranium. The fact that Comey wrote the script for Hillary Clinton is not helping. Is helping Harvey Weinstein, but
yeah. Although we talked about that a couple of weeks ago. The part about Mueller's involvement is new news as of this week. But we talked on the air a couple of weeks ago how some senators had, unearthed and reported documents that showed that Comey had written his exoneration speech long before the conclusion of the investigation, and his reaction of the media was a collective shrug, right. Which I guess there's some kind of logic to it, because it's almost like a dog bites man story. We just all understand that Hillary and everybody she's touched are up to their eyeballs in dirt and mud, and just another story confirming that barely even fits the official definition of news. But given how desperate Hillary and some, but not all, but some of the rest of her party is to relitigate this election. If they want to relitigate it, then we got to get this stuff out there because, I thought we had like a social contract. We'll let her slide on the Clinton Foundation bribery racketeering operation, but as long as we never have to hear from her again. But she hasn't really held up her end of the bargain, has she?
No, I don't get it. I don't really get it. Is she that narcissistic? The story that really got me, and I mentioned this yesterday, was the fact that Bill Clinton supposedly, you can never trust whether the stories is true, but I don't know what the other agenda would be, threw out a copy of the manuscript, like threw it in the trash because he said you're just blaming others. And again, I don't know why they.
Bill has always had better instincts than she has, hasn't he?
Yeah, I haven't read the book, and you probably haven't either. But
I actually did start to read it. I didn't buy it, of course, but you can read the first couple chapters on Amazon. We should do a whole segment maybe next week where we do an old-fashioned fisking of some of it because it's really quite remarkable.
Hey, consider yourself on the show for that one. You already have a copy for next week. Can you tease us a little bit with what you found in the first chapters of what was it called? What happened?
It's basically as you described it. It's just like the litany of people other than herself that's to blame. The one that struck me as the most the most classic piece of chutzpah that you could possibly imagine is she's yelling at the media for giving Trump free advertising early in the campaign just because everyone knows Trump makes for such good TV. Stories about Trump just dominated the news cycle, and of course Trump is very good about playing the news media that way. Mm-hmm. So Hillary's just blaming the news media for basically giving Trump all this free advertising and enabling him to sort of crowd out the rest of the Republican field. Which would be sort of a legitimate complaint, except for the fact that the reason they were doing that was because Hillary told them to. Her campaign very early on decided Trump was the guy they wanted to run against. And not necessarily the dumbest decision at the time. The odds that Trump would put his foot in his mouth enough times to sink his candidacy, not necessarily something you'd want to bet against, right? So, there was this memo that the Clinton campaign circulated that we know about thanks to WikiLeaks, where the Clinton strategists were like, we need to be elevating the candidacy of Trump and other Pied Piper candidates, turning them into the face of the Republican Party and telling the news media to take them seriously. And the news media, of course, dutifully did so. Why do you think they invited, Trump on to host Saturday Night Live, possibly the most crucial juncture of the Republican primary campaign? Right. They were inviting him on, during the general election season. They didn't want to help Trump be president. They wanted to help Trump be Hillary's opponent. And the reason they wanted Trump to be Hillary's opponent was because Hillary wanted their help to get Trump as her opponent. So having schemed to accomplish this, and then turn around and point fingers at the news media for following her marching orders, my jaw was on the floor.
That's funny.
It's like she doesn't. Did she not know that these documents are public? That anyone can go on the WikiLeaks Twitter and see all these examples of the Hillary campaign coordinating to elevate Trump?
Can you imagine Bill's reaction to this stuff? I wonder if he was 100% on the board, or if there was ever an element of maybe we should just rethink this. Can we just talk about this a little bit more?
There were stories like that, and as we were saying, his instinct's much better than hers. He was the only one, according to some reports in the Clinton campaign, who was warning her, "You got to take this guy seriously. Yeah. He's got a real shot against you that someone like Ted Cruz might not have."
Yeah,
because
he's the only non-sycophant in her inner circle.
And he was someone who he has political instincts. He has what they used to call the common touch.
Right.
Bill Clinton could mill about in a crowd of 1,000 construction workers and auto workers and feel comfortable and make other people feel comfortable with him.
Which is different from judgment,
most people who have successful political careers, on a national level can do that. Hillary was the exception because she just, married into her political career and got where she was on the basis of her name and her husband rather than actually, winning any elections.
Yep.
So she never acquired that skill.
And by the way, Keith, I wonder how much she didn't take Comrade Bernie seriously. Also, I wonder if she did the same thing with him. It'll look like I had a real opponent, and this will only help me in the regular season when it seems like it wasn't fixed for me. Which actually, of course, it did turn out to be.
Exactly. She didn't have to take him seriously because it was fixed for her. But I can't imagine Bernie would have gotten that far even if it wasn't fixed. I was saying the whole season when people were saying Bernie's going to do it, I was like, no, Bernie has a higher odds of ending up in a dumpster in Chappaqua than he does of getting the Democratic nomination.
That's true.
There's no scenario in which that was ever going to happen.
His candidacy didn't help her though.
It certainly didn't.
Okay, we got to wind down now. Any final thoughts you have, Keith?
Fun stuff. Well, let's do the Hillary book fisking next week. And,
all right, sounds like a plan.
We'll go through line by line, and we'll have some fun with this one.
All right, Keith Levenberg, thank you. Thanks for coming.
Welcome back on the air. Thanks for having me again.
See you later.
Bye.